Hello, and welcome to the One Time Only Serial Podcast. I'm your host, Tyler Means, and today we're going to be talking about the life of Adnan Syed. So, Adnan was in this long term relationship with this Korean girl named Hae Min Lee, and he would often see her after school. He would often talk to her on the phone. He would often do a lot of stuff with her. Eventually, the two broke up, and she started dating an older guy named Don who worked at her job. They worked at a glasses repair shop, I'm pretty sure. And eventually, somewhere down the line, Hae Min Lee came up missing and was later found dead. So you can see why this would be a huge problem. The first suspect in the case was Mr. S, who was the man who found her. He was believed to be a suspect because of how he found her and the nature of the man in question. The man had been arrested multiple times because he was a streaker and he would often walk around naked. He was caught multiple times, even once by an officer who took his clothes, and he went to the police station to report a theft. And it turns out they was like, "Yeah, we have your clothes. I'm the officer who took it." And it was like a whole big story with that. Um, that was the first suspect. There were many other suspects, but ultimately Adnan became the focus of the state, and they believe Adnan was the killer involved in this case. So Jay is really the star witness that puts all the pieces to the puzzle together. He tells the police Adnan killed Hay. He tells the police where Hay's car is. He tells the police he knows where Hay's body is. He also tells the police that it was all Adnan's idea. Adnan had been talking about killing Hay for a while, and Adnan had killed Hay in the Best Buy parking lot. And he had used the payphone to call him to pick him up from the Best Buy parking lot. And that Adnan had showed him Hay's body, and that he had helped Adnan bury Hay's body in Leakin Park. Now, this looks all bad until you realize Jay's a liar. Jay lies repeatedly about the location in which Adnan showed Hay's body to him. Jay lies about his involvement with the crime. First, he says, "No, I didn't bury Hay." Then he backtracks and says, "We buried Hay together." He lies about the security tapes. He says, "Oh, well, I didn't want them to see the security tapes because I didn't want to be involved with the case." When he was clearly already involved with the case, he was the getaway, and he also helped bury Hay. He also burns his clothes for some reason, even though he claims that minimum involvement with the murder, and he claims that he didn't want any part of it. I feel like Jay does a lot to cover up a lot of the evidence involved in Adnan's case, and he just, because there is no evidence in Adnan's case, he just buries Adnan on top of lie after lie after lie until Adnan is just, he just can't escape it. And it's also like very bad that Adnan can't come up with a story of his own to say, "Wait, no, Jay, I didn't do this," or "No, police, I didn't do this because I had something else that I was doing." But Adnan claims that he can't remember anything about that day because it was so long ago and it was so insignificant to him. Other than the fact that it was his friend Stephanie's birthday, there was nothing special about that day. So he has nothing that he could go back on to say, "Well, no, I was doing this. No, I was at somebody's house doing this." That he just can't say anything about that day. It's really kind of sad if you really think about it. Honestly, my biggest problem with the case is not the case itself. I think if it had been any other witness besides Jay Wilds that told this story, obviously Jay he's pretty messed up. He's a crazy person. Like, by all accounts, his friends at his school called him Dennis Rodman, who has notably been kind of out there. he's also had a like friend say, well, he tried to stab me because I said I'd never been stabbed before, which is like what? So yeah, like I feel like if had it been anybody else besides Jay that said Adnan killed Hay, it'd have been more believable. But the fact that there was no evidence, well, no real evidence that Adnan killed Hay, other than Jay's story. I mean, we could argue the cell phone towers, but not all the cell phone towers were used in court as evidence. So that kind of disproves it. Um, we could also say that, well, why would Adnan give Jay his car? Other than the fact that Adnan is a good person, which his friends say, we could argue that uh, there's no real evidence that Adnan killed Hay, but there is evidence that Jay is involved with the murder and that Jay had a huge part in the murder, whether he believed so or he wanted to say so or not. It really kind of makes me mad looking back into the Serial podcast and kind of reliving it as I listen to them present the evidence. Another thing that really makes me mad is the jury's view on the case. I understand why they would come to such a conclusion like that, where they would believe racism had something to do with the how they were treating Jay, but I don't I want to separate race from the whole case altogether. I felt like this was the wrong time to put Jay in like a special glorified seat where everything he says is so believable and that he's really the underdog fighting against the law, that he's really trying to tell the truth and be righteous and do the right thing. I really hated that whole vibe in the whole courtroom. It just seemed so disgusting to me as I was listening to the podcast and as I was listening to Sarah interview the jurors and how they felt about the case. One juror in particular that said Jay was kind of like a big brother you could look up to and say, well, if I'm in trouble, I'd call him because he would protect me. Well, clearly Jay wasn't, because he did the exact opposite of protecting Adnan. He told on Adnan. I felt like that kind of opinion is kind of invalid when it comes to this. I feel like we should separate emotions from the case. I, I don't know. It just feels kind of disgusting when you kind of go back and you live on it. It's just not what I would particularly have wanted in a courtroom as kind of, I don't know. To end off this podcast, I'm just gonna say I don't know if Adnan's innocent, but I don't think he should have been convicted. And I think if anybody out of this entire case deserved to be convicted, it's Jay. He clearly knows the most about the murder, and he's clearly involved in it in some way, some form, in some fashion. And he's hiding so much evidence from the rest of the world that he deserves to go to jail for what he's done to the family of Hae Min Lee. Thanks again. This is the end of the podcast.